Fantasy is hard. It's really hard. Everything about it is hard. From the world building to the lore to the rules to the historical understanding of your own made-up world. It's hard. I have the utmost respect for writers who can create a whole world with all the bits and bobs attached, because it takes an exceptionally large brain to even conjure up a character, let alone a world. Daddy Tolkien came out of the woodwork with the most epic Middle-earth fantasy of all time, and everyone's eyes bulged at the magnificence that is elf twinks with long blonde hair. Honestly, it changed the world for the better. Look, maybe not all of them are Legolas based, but that was a fun little montage, wasn't it? I bet you all enjoyed those silly boys. And before we explore into even more silly boys and their worlds, I'm gonna hit you guys with a sponsor, and it's someone new today. You know what the problem with modern day browsers is? They're just too goddamn boring. Have you ever used your standard little browser and thought, wow, I wish I had more hot anime babes on my screen right now? Well, guess what? With Opera GX, you get all the hot anime babes you could want. Opera GX turns your browser into the gaming anime mood board you've been dreaming of. The whole thing being completely customizable with all the mods you can find, mostly for free, in the Opera GX store. You can get different vibes for different wives, and the Luffy choices certainly impressed me. Of course, for all you anime babe fans out there, do not fret, you can get Zoro as well. Opera GX is a browser where you have complete control, allowing you to control background music, keyboard sounds, opening and closing tab sounds, theme and colors of the browser, and as previously shown, mod dedicated wallpapers. For example, my typing is now Chopper's little footsteps. Wow, if that feels too much for you, you can turn that all off whenever you want, because you can disable and enable mods and individual modifications in the mods menu, all available from the sidebar. Now, if you're a multitasker and you're in the middle of a long anime series such as, well gosh, nothing really comes to mind. Do not fret, Opera GX has you covered, as you can pull videos out of any website to have them sitting in the corner. Just click the little button on the top center of the video and it's windowed for your viewing pleasure. Not only that, but with the sidebar allowing the addition of multiple apps and video viewing websites, you can scroll things like TikTok while still hitting a got 'em with your friends in Discord. And it takes 2 seconds to import bookmarks over from other browsers. Just press on this gear icon in the bottom left, scroll down to the synchronization, find import bookmarks and settings, and click import. This is a browser made by gamers for gamers, and you'll find multiple settings which will allow you to play your fun little games with ease. Use my link below to download Opera GX today. It'll be the best browser switch you've ever made, and you deserve Luffy glowing menacingly on your homepage. And thank you so much Opera GX for sponsoring this video. I will not let you down. Alright, let's get back on topic. World building doesn't just center around the genre of fantasy. With every fictional series you write, a world must be built. This goes for sci-fi, which is basically just fantasy in space most of the time. Or even just reality-based fiction that needs the world to still be built around the characters, especially if it's a period piece. But for the sake of what we're talking about, let's focus purely on the fantasy. Let's focus on the crazy, the wacky, the unrealistic, and the straight up insane. Because, oh boy, what a surprise, we're talking about One Piece. Yeah, I bet you didn't see that one coming. Don't look at all the other videos on my channel. I have never talked about One Piece in my life, I swear, I swear. Yes, it's all about One Piece yet again, and it's all about the world yet again. I've talked about the power this series has in its freedom of genre, in terms of how One Piece has set itself up to be perfectly endless if it so chooses. But there's something I didn't really touch on in that video. Yes, One Piece can forever expand. Yes, One Piece can add anything at once with pretty minimal explanation. But how does it stay so relevant? Surprisingly enough, you need more than a forever expanding world and the flexibility of creation to stay relatable to an audience of over 26 years. And in saying that, how does One Piece really connect with us? How does it pull us in and grip our skin and drag us into the deep, dark hole that is Monkey D. Luffy's grand and adventure, especially considering it's an epic, wacky fantasy that is so far removed from reality. This is what we'll be looking at and exploring. So get your books out and take notes, because there will be an exam after this. Of course, there won't actually be one, but if you're interested, then do stick around. I promise we're having fun here. As I said at the beginning of this, fantasy is hard. Not anyone can make it, but even more than that, not everyone can make it stick. It's all well and good to have a series with big dragons, princes and princesses, kings, queens, knights, wizards, powers, weird creatures, and anything else you want to consider fantastical. All these elements are good for a spectacle, and by all means that's sometimes the only thing anyone wants. But to make it stick, to make it a pop culture staple that will last years upon years and connect with audiences of all generations, the core of what a fantasy is must be understood. A lot of the time, the fantasy that sticks out and the fictional worlds that connect with us are the ones that are based in some sense of realism. By this, I mean the writing in characters and themes, with the themes being the most important in my opinion. If we use the granddaddy of fantasy, Lord of the Rings, as an example, what are the themes of this series? Well, Tolkien himself stated the core theme of this series was death and immortality, specifically the human desire to escape death. To quote the man himself, "But I should say, if asked, the tale is not really about power and dominion. That only sets the wheels going. It is about death and the desire for deathlessness." I bet some of you are hearing this and going, what the hell, since when? But that's kind of the beauty of the fantasy of Lord of the Rings. You can get so caught up in the marvel that is Middle-earth that you might not openly see this connection upon reading or watching. But I guarantee you, if this series connected with you personally as it did with many others, you probably still felt it. And if you didn't realize this is what Tolkien was going for, give this series a rewatch or reread. Reread is a really stupid term, I'm sorry. From the elves being somewhat immortal beings to Sauron's own immortality due to his obsession with the ring and power, you'll start clicking things together in that big ol' head of yours. But enough of Lord of the Rings. This is like the third time I've compared Lord of the Rings to One Piece in my video. I know. But it's because I truly do think One Piece has earned itself a place as one of the best fantasy epics currently being written. Because One Piece relies so heavily on its themes to tell its story that it's truly masterful in its craft of what it is and what it's becoming. Except it not only leans on those themes to drive the story, but it allows us to disconnect ourselves from them if we so choose, either willingly or subconsciously. Because One Piece has so much going on, has so much candy-colored goodness on the surface of the base, it allows the ugly heart of everything to go virtually unnoticed at times. What the hell do I mean by this? Well, let's look at the main themes of this series to understand that. The biggest theme One Piece has is freedom. Freedom of person and freedom of world. Other themes it includes are the dreams one has and the strength of will that resides within all beings, human or not. If you haven't noticed, these three things, freedom, dreams, and will, are all things that tie into each other. At least in One Piece they tie into each other. One must have the freedom to dream, and one must have the will to allow that dream to become a reality. And in that sense, you gain a freedom like no other. This can be recycled around, switched and flipped every which way, and those three ideas will still spin in a never-ending circle together. It's become much more noticeable in the current story that freedom and liberation is a very important aspect of One Piece. But there's a lot more to it than that, because what makes these themes so strong in upholding this series, and what gives the world of One Piece a sense of depth like no other, is showing an ugly side to the idea of freedom as well. What can freedom mean to a single person? What does the liberation of one mean to another? What makes a person free and and what effect does this have within the world? There's a grayness in these questions, in this theme, and we are already starting to see where One Piece is getting its worldly understanding from. Because let me ask you a question. Does One Piece feel grounded? In this world of devil fruits, of ridiculous monsters, of unimaginable powers and crazy islands, do you feel a sense of connection with this world and these characters? Do you watch or read this series and feel grounded in some form of your own reality? The answer is different for everyone, and that's what I'm expecting because there is no single answer to this. But for me, personally, One Piece feels incredibly grounded. Now let's be real, One Piece offers easy solutions to difficult questions. How do you gain freedom? How do you make your dreams come true? Easy. Punch the shit out of someone. But, and not to compare again, that's about as simple as stopping Sauron by throwing a ring into a volcano. Because at the end of the day, One Piece still has a plot that functions in arcs. This is still a story with a beginning, a middle, a climax, and an end. So there needs to be an answer. There needs to be an easy end. But the answer is not the conflict here. The big bad guy punch is not the place we look to for our realism. If anything, that's what we enjoy in terms of wanting that separation from reality. Because everything else, that beginning and that middle, is where we find that grounded realism. But again, it's been candy-coated for our convenience, on whether we want to see it that way or not. Let's pull up an example of what I'm talking about here, which I will be doing multiple times for multiple reasons, so sit back, relax, and open your mind. Skypiea. Good old Skypiea. The arc where, if you skipped it, I'm approaching your destination at a rapid pace. What happened in this arc? The Straw Hat Gang made it up to the clouds, where we find a dictator residing over everyone. And on top of that, we find a native tribe of a stolen island trying to get their land back. This ensues a lot of wild powers, a lot of crazy creatures, a lot of unreal landscapes, and a lot of big bad fights, as it all takes place up in the clouds. So with a story taking place quite literally up in the clouds, how is it ironically grounded? Where does the connection come from? Where does the reality come from? And where does all the emotion come from? This is by all means the most fantasy of fantasy you can get. Not only that, this arc was written in 2002. From the time of this video's release, that's over 2 decades ago. Yet somehow this arc still sticks with me. Hopefully it stuck with you and will no doubt stick to future audiences years and years into the future. And why is that? Where's the connection here that's made this timeless? Well, because the overarching theme of freedom is covering the nitty-gritty of what this arc actually is. The natives of this island, known as the Shandia tribe, have been colonized. The freedom they're searching for is to get their home back. Meanwhile, the people of Skypiea have found themselves under a tyrannical rule, completely passive in this story due to being unable to act as they want without the fear of punishment. They're searching for a freedom of livelihood under an iron-fisted government. If you want more about all of this, I have a video about Skypiea specifically covering all these topics. Anyways, my point here is there is plenty of upsetting realism here. Wiper's character especially is a heartbreaking one, considering this is a man who feels disconnected from what he's fighting for anymore. All he knows is his ancestors have fought for their native island. His people have not known peace for 500 years, and he's been given the duty of continuing this fight. This guy is quite literally pushing that damn boulder up that damn hill. So when it comes to Skypiea and the character of Wiper, you can look on the surface. You can see a fake tribe up in the clouds in this fake world, and you can take the flashy fighting for what it is. Or you can see a character who's become disconnected disconnected from his heritage, who's fighting for a land he was never allowed to live on, who's been removed from a home he never had, and it can become a lot more graphic in its conception. But to make this all fictional is an obvious conscious choice, but it's one that Oda does very well. In fact, within Skypiea there was a disease that spread from tree to tree, and then spread from person to person. Someone specifically asked if this disease was real, and the answer Oda gave is something I found extremely interesting. To quote, he explained, "It's always difficult telling stories that deal with diseases and things like this. Made up diseases that are too scary can worry folks needlessly, whereas using real diseases can hit a little too close to home for some readers. That's why I ended up taking elements of real-world curable diseases and mixed them up a bit. Now of course there is a time One Piece mentions scurvy, but as that's known to be the pirate's disease that's not exactly a personal problem to anyone anymore, I think it gets away with that. Unless you're not eating your fruits and vegetables, in which have fun with scurvy, you dog." But the reason that answer interested me is because yeah, that's a sign of a good fantasy writer. It's kind of no doubt that One Piece would become the cultural phenomenon it was starting to become with a writer who shows an emotional intelligence such as that. Because while One Piece has a reality base, it's still a fantasy. It's still a genre that's made as an escape for some, and the inclusion of real-world disease can be an incredibly touchy subject. So the solution is to somewhat mirror a real-world disease, change the qualities around a little bit, and call it something else as to fit within this fantasy realm. We quite literally see this with Law and Flevance Town, another masterful example of the reality base covered by this fantasy story. Now here's the thing, Law's story is extreme. In fact, One Piece has a habit of hitting us out of nowhere with extremely depressing, extremely dark stories. Whenever I meet people who think One Piece isn't dark enough or One Piece isn't brutal as a story, I'm always shocked. But again, that's what makes this series so timeless and gives it the broad appeal it currently has. Because if we look at Law's story and if we see it at face value, we can see Oda's sentiment of not wanting to hit too close to home. Law's town was plagued by a disease called amber lead disease. And is this disease real? No. Does it hold similarities to other diseases in real life, in name and in function? Of course it does, but it can be disconnected in such a way to be the fiction it's trying to be. Because what happens to Law's town due to this outbreak? The government decides it's not worth their time. They want to keep their riches with none of the consequences. And they refuse to explain the cause of the outbreak as to continue pumping out this jewelry that the common person had to suffer for. With the propaganda spread that white lead disease is contagious and the worldwide belief one can catch this disease from the infected just by touching them, there was no single victim of this illness that was looked upon with any sense of kindness. It was simply easier for the government to remove these people from the map, burning the city to let the common person suffer. Children shot down and burned alive due to the fear-mongering pushed by higher-ups in privileged positions of power. And this is all in a funny pirate show. The kicker is, there are plenty of points in this scenario that can indeed mirror the real world. From the fear of the disease, to the rich reaping the rewards, to deciding it's easier to just leave all those suffering to die. Even if you, as a viewer, don't have any personal experiences with any of these harrowing situations, this can still hold similarities regarding historical events that have taken place and still repeat to this very day. The reason I'm not giving any examples is because it can connect differently to everyone. And also because Mr. YouTube doesn't exactly like talk of the destruction and the death of this world, but you can come to your own conclusions. Yet, this is still a fantasy. This is still a fake town in a fake world with a fake disease and a fake cure. While it can absolutely be based on real events, none of it is real, and it's never on the nose enough to want to be real in that way. And that's the candy-coated layer I've been talking about. Oda has done a fantastic job in making Law's story digestible, in making it hard to watch but not hard to stomach, because these scenes are brutal. This is totally brutal. The death of his friends, his parents, his sister, hiding under dead bodies to escape, being on the run since he was 10 years old, being rejected from every hospital and by every doctor due to this disease he's been plagued with. If I may speak frankly, this shit sucks. But with this world existing as it is, with the idea there's always a new dawn, with Luffy existing as a character who quite literally embodies hope, we watch Law's story with this belief there are better things to come, because that's the tone One Piece has set, and that's the constant turning of this fantastical theme of liberation we've been promised. And there's a permanence to that, to the cheesiness that this world offers. I think one of the best examples I can use for just how well done the fantasy is used in this world, and how everything we see is just an over-exaggeration pushed with colorful hyper-realism, is Sanji's story in Whole Cake Island. Yes, I know I keep talking about this, and I know I've made like 2 videos on this already, but hear me out. It's one of my favorite arcs for a reason. With each arc we get new themes, and with new themes comes new questions. And Whole Cake Island 100% was about blood family and the struggle one faces within an abusive one. But remember, there's still the permanent overarching theme of freedom. That's something to constantly remember here. So, Whole Cake Island is a more recent arc One Piece has included, but will it be timeless? Apart from an issue here or there, as all stories have, yes, I truly do believe this arc specifically will be one for the ages. That sounds dramatic, but I'm not exaggerating, because this arc specifically, the themes of blood family and the complications of blood relation, is one a majority of people can connect to. The thing is, it's been done in such a way we don't have to see it that way. And I truly do believe Oda is at his best here in how he uses this realm of fiction to help soften the blow, so to speak. Let's look at Sanji's situation so I can unpack what I'm trying to say. Sanji was born into a household of war, where there was a hierarchy of power regarding his father, brothers, sister, and mother. He was an experiment. He was supposed to be an emotionless killing machine that did whatever his father said and continued the glory of the Vinsmoke name. The only thing is that didn't happen, and he turned out to be a soft boy with a heart of gold and a weird toothy toddler smile. But Sanji's brothers, they were emotionless monsters who abused him nearly every day. His sister did as their father told, and his mother had absolutely no say in the matter due to passing away early in his life. And let's be real, Sanji's family looks ridiculous. His father, Judge, looks like he's been pulled straight out of a supervillain comic. His brothers are all techno-colored freaks with stupid hair and even stupider outfits. And this whole castle is just a giant moving snail that can split apart at will. Anyone can look at Sanji's story and see it as a ridiculous overkill. Can look at Judge's huge stature and his brother's emotionless states and feel disconnected from it. But that's kind of the point, because such a thing as family abuse is much too real and much too heavy for some. The true genius in such an odd setting though, and the hyper-realism here, is this situation can be anyone's reality turned up to 11. I'll try to be as vague as possible because this is the reality of many, and the last thing I want is to be insensitive to such situations. But let's take the reality reality of Sunji's situation. Sunji is a child in an abusive household who is controlled by his father, beaten by his brothers, and mostly ignored by his sister unless it's behind Judge's back. The reality is, anyone in Sunji's situation would quite literally see their father as this terrifying villain. They'd see their brothers as these emotionless monsters, and they'd feel helpless to the point they're trapped. His story is one you can take literally or figuratively. Is Judge really that big of a man, or is that just how Sunji sees him due to the threatening presence Judge has always been in Sunji's life? Are Sunji's brothers really emotionless monsters, or does he just feel that's what they are due to what they put him through? How you interpret all this is up to you, and amidst it all, questions pop up on how one deals with such a situation. Realistically, there is no easy answer for familial abuse. There is no black and white on how to get out of this situation. But that's where the fantasy can truly come into play. Because while there's a constant grey within these questions, One Piece will nearly always give us one answer, and that's to punch the shit out of someone. A country is in a civil war? Punch a pirate. An island is trapped under a dictator? Punch him. Someone's being chased down by an insane abuser? They're getting punched. Racism? Punched. Homophobia? Punched again. This can go on and on and on. And like I said previously, there's a permanence to that cheesiness that keeps One Piece on top, because it can be cathartic for many. One Piece isn't trying to answer such complicated questions with anything intelligent. It's not attempting to be a realistic think piece that makes you sit in your room and cry for days on end, even though that has indeed happened to me due to this series. One Piece's world is simply a what if. It's an idea that, hey, all these things suck, but what if the solution was that simple? What if we can solve all these problems with just a punch? What if one funny monkey boy could lift you out of that hole and take your hand as you run away from your abusive father together? Within the questions there is a realism, but within the answers there is a fantasy. And that's what One Piece wants to be. Grounded in its conception, romantic in its execution. And in my opinion, that's what good fantasy is, because that's what makes it so timeless. There's plenty of agendas in One Piece. One not all would agree with, nor everyone can see. The ones off the top of my head is this series is quite definitely anti-rich, anti-military in its message. And I'm betting a few of you watching this are thinking, what the hell is she talking about? But the fact these opinions differ is why One Piece has gotten such a vastly wide audience, because some people just want to watch this series at face value. Some people just want to enjoy the cartoon world for what it is, want to see the funny rubber boy stretch, and want to see ridiculous villains be ridiculous in all their ridiculousness. But some of us also want to dig into it. We want to see what's under the sugar-coated layer, and we want to interpret these bits and pieces in ways we feel a connection to. Because while Oda can very well blast you with any ideology he wants through this series, it will never feel like you're being pushed into it. You can choose, either subconsciously or not, if you want to enjoy this fantasy for what it is. Or you can jump in head first and deconstruct every scene, sentence, and character like I totally haven't been doing. And there's such an insane talent to that, in allowing those who want to disconnect to disconnect, and allowing those who want to read into it to read into it. One Piece at its core will always be a silly series. Oda has expressed this sentiment numerous times, that no matter how serious it gets, he will always want it to be fun. And considering we've jumped from civil wars to literal mermaid slavery to an imprisoned nation under the claw of a dragon, and I'm still having fun, I'd say he's been doing his job very well. One Piece has become timeless in its fiction, and it's become iconic with its themes of freedom. There will always be a semblance of realism in this story, in these characters, and in this world. But so long as that solid grasp of fantasy is kept at the forefront, it's guaranteed to forever connect to future audiences and generations without the fear of scaring them off. Will it age like a fine wine? Well, some parts most definitely won't and already kind of haven't. But as a story overall, will we always fondly remember it as a fantastical epic that tugged at our hearts and kept us laughing along the way? I think so. And in my opinion, that's a pretty awesome legacy to have. And with that, thanks for watching. The fantasy aspect of One Piece is something that's always fascinated me, especially considering the wild audience it seems to have. So I was desperate to get this all out there in hopes of making it make sense. Hopefully this wasn't just word vomit and was somewhat coherent, but let me know what you think. Do you think One Piece does fantasy well? Do you have any favorite aspects of the series that hit a little too close to home? Or have you found any real-world similarities within the series that shocked you to some extent? I'm curious about all of it, so throw it at me. Just a quick reminder that I do have a Patreon, and if you would like to support me there, I'd really appreciate it. However, I know not everyone can support me in that way, and just watching and sharing these videos does more than you can imagine for me. If there's anything you'd like to see me cover, One Piece or otherwise, please let me know, and I'll see you in whatever I make next. See ya!